Nick, why does it feel like the wheels are coming off this team as they inch closer to ending the season? Do you think the Browns should clean house and build again around Baker?
Well, yes, obviously they should clean house. And that means, I think clean house means fire the head coach. The general manager, John Dorsey, his job's going to be safe, but he's now on far more tenuous footing than anyone could have anticipated going into this year, because one thing Dorsey, the best thing on his resume with the Browns was, I picked Baker Mayfield. That looked amazing a year ago. It obviously right now looks far more questionable, even if I still believe in Baker's ability to turn this around. But for the Browns, this has been the worst case scenario season. Baker looks terrible. More on that in a bit. The locker room does appear to officially be falling apart, with the reports that Odell a month and a half ago was saying during the games in October, come get me to opponents. Jarvis now reportedly, according to Mike Silver, echoing those statements against the Arizona Cardinals. They don't have any direction. I mean, just a few weeks ago, the best player on their team thumped an opposing quarterback in the head with his helmet. That seems like it's a footnote. The head coach, of course, then wore the Pittsburgh started-it shirt. Like, all of this has been a comedy of errors for Cleveland. The only silver lining, Danny, is because they've lost 2 of their last 3, because they are now de facto eliminated from the postseason, I believe they absolutely will move on from Freddie Kitchens, which is better for their long-term future than sneaking into the playoffs and keeping Freddie Kitchens, because he seems way in over his head, and that's where the house cleaning has to start.
I've been late to this party because I always try to give guys the benefit of the doubt, right? Say, hey, it's first year, maybe you can learn on the fly. You know, we've seen coaches survive rough starts and be able to accomplish great things, right? They come back from it. This, to answer your question, the wheels have come off. They're long gone. The car's on fire. You know, you're trying to put the fires out left and right. That's the perfect way to describe it, as somebody who's in over their head. And it shouldn't be that much of a surprise. The guy doesn't have much experience as a coordinator. He's been a position coach. And all of a sudden, they just, here you go. Here's the keys. And we should have listened to when some coaches that were on the staff said, you know what, a lot of the success that came last year wasn't really because of Freddie Kitchens. It was some of the other guys on that staff who are no longer there. You mentioned, you know, the Myles Garrett situation. You know, he's in charge of that.
Of course.
We've talked a lot about the discipline issues with penalties, you know, just stupid, foolish penalties. Those fall on the head coach. Like, what type of culture are you creating at practice? That carries over into games. You haven't been able to keep. Now, this might be a hard job to do, but it is his job to keep Odell Beckham happy, to keep Jarvis Landry happy, to keep your best players invested. He's lost them clearly. Records aside, the exchange they just showed right there with Jarvis Landry, where he comes over there and, you know, see Baker, it is bad. And when you've lost the locker room, and I think that's where Freddie Kitchens is now, that to me is the sign it's over. You are done with, because you don't regain that trust and those relationships just like that. It takes time, and a lot of times the damage is done, and I think that's where they are now for the Browns. And it's the question then becomes, well, where do you go? You know, and I do think a college coach like a Lincoln Riley, but here's the thing, would you want this job? And he's got a really good job at Oklahoma, makes a lot of money. It's pretty close to what you can make in the NFL. But I think Baker Mayfield loved college. He still kind of has a college mentality when you see him, you know, talking about rivalries and calling out teammates who are going to leave in free agency when Duke Johnson was wanted to be traded. Like, that's a hard pill to swallow early in your career. You don't understand that. But you become a professional, you're like, that's part of the business. I still think Baker would thrive with a college-type coach. That's why I do think Lincoln Riley would be a good option. Urban Meyer was in Ohio, from Ohio. Like, I think he'd be a good option. But that's the one thing that kind of concerns me. What direction are you going to go after this? And that would be, you know, the third head coach for Baker Mayfield. That's a tough ask.
Do you think that our expectations were just a little too high for this team, and that they bought into it, that they were a young team that maybe heard or listened more than they should have listened to what everyone was saying about them, how high everyone perched them before the season began? And there was just no way anyone was going to live up to those expectations.
Well, I agree with everything you said until the very end. I mean, they absolutely could have lived up to the expectations. You win 10 games. I mean, the expectations weren't they win the Super Bowl. The expectations weren't they be the best team in football. It was a team that went 7-8-1 last year with a horrible kicking situation and turnover at the head coach position and a rookie quarterback, get a couple games better. I don't think they were unrealistic expectations. They just failed on all fronts. And you can't succeed in this league with a bad head coach and with the quarterback playing the way Baker is. You could have any other combination. We can talk about Odell being underachieving, Jarvis being unhappy, the Myles Garrett suspension, the defense not being as good as I thought it would be. But ultimately, you could have the 85 Bears defense and the 0-1 Pats special teams. And if you have a head coach and quarterback combo right now that's coaching the way Freddie Kitchens is, and show Baker's numbers. Baker has been a train wreck. He has been, by any estimation, one of the 5 worst everyday starters in the league this year. Can't win that way.
Nope.
Just flatly cannot win that way. So, now, did the expectations get to Baker? Possibly. He clearly was listening to the outside noise. There's no question about that. But Baker has been terrible this year. That has been a constant. Freddie Kitchens has shown no ability. There's no reason to believe he is prepared or qualified for this job. And by the way, his football resume up until 14 months ago said he was not prepared or qualified for this job. I wouldn't go Lincoln Riley. To me, that would be rewarding Baker. Baker would love that. I hate to say this because I feel like it's the old man yelling from the porch, but Baker might need a little humbling. And this season, I think, has been humbling. And having a third head coach is not a good start for any quarterback, but Hugh was not his fault. I don't think Freddie's his fault. They just hired the wrong guy. Bringing in a Ron Rivera type, or Mike McCarthy, who was mentioned for this last year because of the relationship with John Dorsey. Someone who has experience in this league. The reason I say Rivera is because then you're the quarterback and you're like, oh, the head coach is not being picked based on me. He's a defensive-minded coach. Pick the offensive coordinator based on Baker. Pick the head coach based on the organization. I'm not saying Lincoln Riley wouldn't be successful,
right,
but for this team, I don't know if it's what they need.
It's a mess, for sure. It is an absolute mess. I think Ron Rivera beat out somebody that brings some stability there. But you said Baker's, humbled. He has to be, but has he learned? That's the thing I don't know.
Will he spend the offseason maybe no commercials?
Not even the commercials, but has he learned the way to handle media, to throw? I mean, it was just 2 weeks ago he's throwing the medical staff under and calling out and talking about Odell's injury. Those are things you don't air out with the media. He got into in a feud with a media member there in Cleveland not that long ago. To me,
Grossi.
He's been humbled somewhat, but has he truly learned what it takes to be a professional? I still think he has a long way to go.
All right. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.